Chihiro here. Inspired by the spirit of the Christmas season, I drew some Ghibli characters on Procreate, and I hope you enjoyed this little draw with me time-lapse, and let's get on with it. Just before we get started, I'll quickly show you some of the references I used for this piece, and the app I'm using is Visref, which I think is a great mood board app for drawing in general. Right now, I'm just laying down a rough pencil sketch using the Peppermint brush. Well, technically it's the second rough pencil sketch because I actually did an extremely rough pencil sketch when I was finalizing the composition of the artwork. I actually had this idea a couple months ago when I was doing Ghibli theme in my bullet journal, and it looks something like this. And back then I just thought it looked really weird, and the composition I had then actually reminds me of Last Supper, so I fell out of love with the idea and just abandoned it. But recently I just wanted to finish some of my abandoned artworks to end 2020 on a better note, so I came back to this piece. Inspiration-wise, I just thought it would be cute to gather some of my favorite Ghibli characters for a little feast. Plus, I always thought Ghibli food looks really enticing, so gathering all these elements, I came up with the idea of a cozy dinner party at a wooden cottage during Christmas season, and it spoke to me and I quite liked what I came up with in the end. So that was the little story behind the artwork. On the technical side of things, I only used Procreate's native brushes. For sketching, I usually default to Peppermint, which is what I used in this piece, or 6B pencil. I just really like the texture of these two pencil brushes, and I'll try to point out other brushes I used along the way, and I'll probably include it somewhere on screen as well for reference. For the food illustrations, I actually felt a little troubled during the sketching process because I've hardly drawn any food illustrations, both digitally and traditionally. I felt challenged just thinking about how to color them in later, but turns out I actually really enjoyed the process more than I imagined, so that was a surprising byproduct of this entire process, I suppose. And originally, I actually wanted to fit in the turnip head in the corner as well, but I realized it's impossible to do so without sacrificing the size of other characters due to physical proportions. So I settled with just a little picture on the shelf, as if he sent a little holiday postcard to the rest of the characters. And I just realized that my hair keeps creeping into the frame, so I apologize for that. And to fill up the blank space, I decided on the spur of the moment to add in a little hanging potted plant and also some fairy lights to add some festivities to the painting. With my pencil sketch done, it's time to move on to the line art. For line art, I always go for dry ink for most of my illustrations because, again, lovely texture. And some of my other favorite brushes for line art include Studio Pen and Monoline because they are relatively flat and easier to predict. For line art, sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it. For this piece, it was actually quite alright. I think it's probably because I made my pencil sketch relatively neat, so it made my life a lot easier when I'm doing the line art. It looks like a really clean piece of line art, but little did I know that I will run into some serious trouble later on when I'm doing some color blocking, and you'll see why very soon. But before that, look at the mini Totoro, the baby chair! I just thought it's a cute idea to actually include the smaller Totoros instead of the largest gray Totoro for this picture because those two are really cute as well and they need some love and attention. And for mini Totoro, I thought about putting him in a baby chair because he's just very small. And now that I really think about it, I wonder if Totoros actually eat food. Like, what kind of food do they eat? What are they made of, really? But in the end, it just doesn't really matter because they're just goddamn cute, and that alone is enough. Next up is color blocking, and oh boy, I did not realize that's where my trouble starts. And I'm not sure if you can tell how much I was struggling with color blocking in this part because the footage was sped up by 16 times, but I was really frustrated when I was color blocking faceless. Color blocking faceless because I couldn't find where the goddamn gap in the line art is. And just for your information, I am trying to color block by setting the line art layer as the reference layer and drop colors in the areas I want. It's a huge pain in the ass when the line art has gaps for this particular reason. I know it's a noob mistake, but I hope some of you can relate to the pain I experienced during this session. I deliberately erased some parts, like the light-facing parts of Faceless away, because his body is actually translucent in the movie, and I'm just trying to emulate the effect by using an eraser at, I think, around 50% opacity to brush away some parts to get that translucent effect. For color blocking, I usually use a round brush because I think it's the flattest brush you can get in Procreate, but sometimes I alternate with hard airbrush as well. I think both of them do the same trick, except that the hard airbrush's brush size is relatively smaller than the round brush, and sometimes it still has a softer edge around, so it might make your color blocking not as clean. But it's okay because you can always use an eraser later on to clean up the edges. And sorry, my glasses and my hair popped into the frame again. I apologize for that. And nothing else too special to comment about in this section, so I'll just hang back and let you chill with some music, and until then. Since we're at the segment of painting food, you might recognize some or even all of the foods I drew, and indeed they're all based on the rather iconic foods in the entire Ghibli entourage. The fish pie is from Kiki's Delivery Service, the eggs and bacon from Howl's Moving Castle, the cake, which I took the liberty to make it into a crab cake, is from the scene in Spirited Away in Zeniba's house, and the cream soup is from Castle in the Sky, I think, and the bacon and egg is from Howl's Moving Castle, and the bowl ramen, I think it's from Ponyo, I think. Yeah, it's from Ponyo, and the more peculiar dish, which I think is a stuffed squid, is of course from Spirited Away. And yes, I actually needed to pull up a reference to look at how bacon looks like, because I can't remember on top of my head how bacon is supposed to look like. I'm definitely getting old. And now that we mentioned Spirited Away's animators actually included some very interesting foods in the movie. I didn't realize there were actually a lot of Chinese food in the movie, especially in the scenes in the bathhouse. These are just easy details to gloss over when you're watching the movie because they're just there in the background. But now that I actually looked at the screen grab GIF up close, it's just really endearing to see how much effort is paid even to the minute details in the background. And fun fact, the ghost town and bathhouse is modeled after a city in Taiwan called Jiufen. So it was kind of fun to be able to recognize all the foods they included, except for the stuffed squid, fish. I don't really know what that is really. And at first I actually thought it was stuffed duck or chicken, but when I saw the tail I was like, oh, I didn't know what it was, but I don't think it's a Chinese dish. If you do know of such a Chinese dish, let me know. And oh yeah, about weird exotic foods in Spirited Away. Of course, there's also the bun Chihiro's dad was eating. Actually, it's not a bun. I did my research. It's the stomach of a coelacanth. You're probably going like, huh, right now. I did too. I didn't even know how to pronounce the word until I looked up on Wikipedia, but that's what one of the animators who worked for the film claimed it was. It's a type of fish. I'll link the news article where I read about it in the description box if you're interested. On the next day, I got started with the fun part of adding lighting and shadows after I finally got the color blocking done. Right now, I'm just using a combination of soft airbrush and noise brush to create some light reflections. I can't really pronounce anything today. But anyways, coming back, using a noise brush, of course, is optional. But I thought that using a noise brush in this piece would help create a softer effect and atmosphere. And I quite liked how it turned out in the end, so I kept it. As someone who is kind of new to digital art in general, I'm still learning my way around lighting and shadows, but one thing I realized is to be bold and just play around, like with the layer effects and with colors and how you position your lighting and dark shadows and etc. There are a lot of things you can play around and maneuver for lighting and shadows. If you are a beginner to Procreate or even to digital art in general like me, I think Procreate's introductory tutorial videos on the layer effects on the IGTV is quite helpful for learning the foundation because there are all universal principles that apply to all digital art softwares like Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, and even photo editing softwares. So it's very useful just to learn the basic knowledge before you get into anything. But to keep things on the simpler side, there are only a couple of layer effects that you will commonly use for lightings and shadows. For lighting, usually you will go for screen or overlay, and for shadows, that would be multiply and darken. I think these 4 effects are the ones that I usually gravitate towards. But of course, just experiment and play around and see what works better and have fun. Basically, that's the most important thing. And some more tips if you are an absolute beginner. Clipping mask is your friend. You need it for lightings and shadows, otherwise your life is gonna be a painful mess. And of course, remember to do your layer management as you add more lighting and the shadow layers to reduce clutter. But I think this is for personal preference. It's just that I like my workspace really clean and really organized. I'm kind of an organization freak in terms of clutter. So yeah, that's just a personal preference. As you can see, I'm grouping some of my layers together as I work. It just makes my life easier later on. And my camera died halfway just as I was adding my probably proudest touch in this entire piece with the gold highlights using the noise brush. And I was hoping that I can celebrate this little moment of joy that I felt back then. But too bad, my camera gave up halfway, so never mind. I really had fun with lighting this piece because it's quite amazing to look at how lighting, just a few touches of lighting with some gold colors, is it gold? Yeah, oak yellow color basically can really brighten up the entire piece and just makes the atmosphere so much more cozier. And yeah, I really enjoyed that part actually. The lighting and shadows for the characters, I'm starting to play around with the native light brushes in Procreate, but none of them really worked, and I just settled for the simple soft airbrush in the end. And look at that glow. It just makes the piece so much better. And of course, sorry about the weird cut again. My camera decides to give up at the best parts, so I'm really sorry about that. Well, the window lighting was supposed to be the cherry on top, and this is the perfect moment to cue in like the halo sound effect. But you know, my camera was just being very uncooperative that day, so my loss, I guess. But in hindsight though, I should have added the light, like the light rays much earlier, like even before I started lighting each individual characters, because that is a light source. And it's just a learning lesson for me. Next time, I mean for you and for me, identify your light source and draw some guiding light rays first, and let that guide you and help you in deciding where to light different parts and where to draw the shadows. Oh, and I just realized that I forgot to mention that I like to use a soft blending brush. It's late at night, I can't really pronounce anything. Sorry about that. And anyways, I just use a soft blending brush to soften the edges between lights and shadows. I know there are some art styles that do better with very punctuated light and shadow borders. So again, just experiment with what you like, and maybe that's how you find an art style really in the end. So just have fun. I think that's just the most important principles when it comes to art, really. And for the chicken. Okay, now my eyes are failing too. I'm really getting old. Anyways, coming back, and I'm just using a studio brush to add additional highlights on the stuffed squid, just to make the yellows more vibrant. But I was very lazy for the sushi. I just didn't really bother about adding detailed shadows and highlights. For the steam from the bowl of ramen, I just used the smoke brush in Procreate. I think it's found under the section called Elements, I think it works just fine since it's just a couple of thin whips. I don't really bother about having realistic smoke effects right now, so I'll just settle with that. For the egg as well, I use a studio pen. Actually, I've been mispronouncing studio pen as studio brush. I'm really sorry. I just realized towards the end of the video. I'm so sorry. Anyways, for the egg, I thought it would be better to use a brown studio pen just to color the outline to mimic the burnt edges. And right now I'm just experimenting with different brushes for the wood texture of the table. And in the end, I realized that that Procreate's own wood brush looks too synthetic. So I actually just used a willow charcoal brush, I think, along with some lines drawn using the dry ink brush to mimic some wooden texture. And to complete the look, I went back to my line art and drew some rugged edges around the table and cleaned up the colors. And for the rest of the part, I'm just going over some of my previous shadows and adding some more lighting, some more shadows for the walls and the background as well. Same process, nothing too special to comment about. So again, I'll talk to you when the time comes. And for now, just sit and chill with some music. For the window source of lighting, I actually went back and experimented with different effects. I think I settled on the ad in the end because I really want the window lighting to really pop and just to make it feel like a warm, cozy winter day. And I think it worked out quite fine in the end. And as you can see later, I got quite lazy when it comes to lighting the fairy lights because it was fairly late. I was just kind of done with the painting. As much as I like this painting, I mean, there comes a certain point where you're just really done with it. I just want to go over the rest. So I just sloppily did some soft light halos with the soft airbrush and quickly wrapped up the day. And now coming to the final day. Finally, it took me so much longer than I expected. I think it took like 10 hours in the end in total, so to finish the piece. So I really admire how people like Sam Does Arts can make awesome portraits in just under 2 hours. And anyways, for today, this was not very strenuous or very taxing. My main goal is just to clean up the line art and fill in any gaps in my colors layer, mainly because I want to convert my line art into an overlay layer to give the entire piece a softer look. And that is what I'm doing now. Nothing too special, but I think just cleaning up your line art and making the colors look much cleaner will really give your art piece a more polished look. Anyways, might as well just explain what overlay does. In short, overlay means that the final color is a darker value of the color underneath. I'm not sure if it actually makes sense, but I think it was one of Pipa's art videos that did a pretty good job in explaining. I'll link the video. It's actually not a Procreate tutorial, but it was a GIF tutorial. But I think she mentioned some really good principles that are worth learning from. So I'll link it in the description if you're interested to check out. And ta-da! This is the finished look of my painting. I hope you enjoyed this relatively chatty draw of me time-lapse video. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and show me your support of love in the comments. And subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!